Hello everyone, and welcome to this Diablo 3 dungeon guide for the Necromancer Bones of Rathma set. We'll be going over how to set up your character, and I'll also explain how to complete both primary dungeon objectives. Keep watching until the end to see a full playthrough of the entire set dungeon with additional tips. To get started, let's first take a look at the set bonuses so we'll know how to gear out our character. This set revolves around the Army of the Dead skill. The skill has a base cooldown of 2 minutes, and it is the only attack that will do worthwhile damage while using this set. Luckily, the 2-piece set bonus mechanic reduces Army of the Dead's cooldown via damage-dealing attacks by your permanent minions from the command skeletons and revive skills. With every additional minion active, there will be more hits dealt to reduce Army of the Dead's cooldown, and there will be more damage and toughness benefit provided from the other set bonuses. Therefore, ultimately, cooldown reduction is the main priority for the gearing and skill setup. In this setup, we are using 5 of the 6 set pieces in the shoulders, torso, hands, legs, and feet slots. In the head slot, we have Leoric's Crown, which provides extra cooldown reduction with a diamond equipped in the helm. In the wrist slot, we take Bonds of Selena, which buffs the damage of Army of the Dead. In the waist slot, we have Dainty's Binding, which provides a toughness bonus when using a curse. In the main hand and offhand slots, we have the Jesseth, Skull Scythe, and Skull Shield. This 2-piece weapon set provides bonuses via the Command Skeleton skill. In the next slot, we take the S of Johann, which provides some extra minor grouping utility. In one of the finger slots, we take Brig's Wrath, which adds a grouping mechanic to your curse skill. This legendary power is a significant quality of life improvement for killing off monsters in the dungeon. And in the other finger slot, we have Convention of Elements, which provides an occasional damage boost. When it comes to rerolling stats on the gear, the top priority is cooldown reduction, as mentioned previously. Since the main set mechanic in one of the primary dungeon objectives relies on minions hitting monsters, not killing them, to reset the cooldown on Army of the Dead, you may need to tweak your stats to lower damage output to avoid killing enemies too quickly. For Kanai's Cube in the weapon slot, we have Engium, which provides some additional cooldown reduction after killing elite monsters. In the armor slot, we take Stewart's Greaves, which provides significant increased movement speed. These boots are highly recommended since they make it much easier to clear enemies within the time limit. And in the jewelry slot, we have Ring of Royal Grandeur, which allows us to gain the 6-piece set bonus while only having 5 of the 6 set pieces equipped. For gems, we have a diamond in the head slot for cooldown reduction, topazes in the torso and leg slots, and an emerald in the weapon slot. For legendary gems, we have Esoteric Alteration for increased toughness, Gogok of Swiftness for some additional cooldown reduction, and Molten Wildebeest Gizzard for life regeneration. For Paragon, the main priorities are movement speed, cooldown reduction, and resource cost reduction. Next, let's go over the skills. We'll be using Army of the Dead, which is mandatory for the dungeon. We take the Dead Storm Rune, which will allow us to deal damage while moving, making it much easier to kill all of the enemies within the time limit. Next, we have Command Skeletons with the Frenzy Rune, and Revive with the Personal Army Rune. Both of these skills are needed to help boost the benefits from the set bonuses. Next, we take Blood Rush with the Potency Rune. Combined with the Stewart's Greaves legendary power, this skill will give you some significant increased movement speed to travel through the dungeon or just to get out of tight spots. Next, we have Decrepify with the Borrowed Time Rune. This skill provides extra cooldown reduction, and using a curse will provide extra benefits from the Dainty's Binding and Brig's Wrath legendary powers. Then we have Bone Armor with the Harvest of Anguish rune, which provides some extra movement speed and toughness. For the passive skills, we have Fueled by Death, which provides increased movement speed. Then we take Dark Reaping, which provides essence resource after each kill. This passive skill is crucial since we will not be using an essence generator skill in the build. Make sure you have a scythe equipped to gain its benefit. Next, we have Spreading Malediction, which provides increased damage output. And lastly, we take Blood as Power, which provides some occasional extra cooldown reduction. Now let's go over the dungeon objectives. The first primary dungeon objective is to accumulate a total of 500 seconds of cooldown reduction on Army of the Dead. With each cast of Army of the Dead, you will initially gain several seconds counting toward this objective based on the amount of cooldown reduction you have in your character sheet from equipped items and Paragon points. Afterward, you will gain additional seconds based on your minions' attacks from the 2-piece set bonus. Since Army of the Dead is virtually your only damage dealing skill, you are already highly motivated to get as much cooldown reduction as possible via these 2 avenues, so you should achieve this objective without much extra effort. Just make sure your damage output isn't incredibly high where your minions are killing monsters too quickly without being able to hit them several times each. In fact, your Army of the Dead skill should be killing nearly every enemy in the dungeon, while your minions kill virtually none. The second primary dungeon objective is to revive 100 corpses. This objective is as simple as it sounds. Just cast the Revive skill on corpses to get credit. Each cast of Revive will summon up to 10 new minions, and the skill has no cooldown nor resource cost, so you can cast it as frequently as desired. Since the set bonuses make your minions invulnerable and last forever, you are not inherently motivated to keep casting Revive throughout the dungeon, so you'll just need to be disciplined about making progress toward this objective. Next, let's take a look at the dungeon map. This dungeon is relatively small. The best approach is to hug the outside walls and loop all the way around, then finish off the dungeon by clearing out the interior sections of any residual enemies. I've broken the map up into 3 main segments. When you first enter the dungeon, head to the initial large area and kill as many enemies as practical, but don't worry about clearing everything here yet, because you'll return later. After you've thinned out the monsters a fair amount, follow segment number 2 to the next large area. Here you want to clear out all the enemies. Then follow segment number 3 back to the initial large area and clean up the remaining monsters. As long as you thoroughly clear the corridors and offshoots along the way, any stragglers should be found in this first area and you'll be done. So now that you have the setup and you know how to approach the dungeon, let's head to it. Go to Act 2, then to the Temple of the Firstborn Level 1 waypoint. From there, take the portal to the Sacred Path that's right next to the waypoint. Then head south. There's only one main path to follow. The dungeon entrance is on the left side prior to reaching the portal to the Shrouded Moors. And next we'll look at the playthrough. For this run, I went with very bare bones gear to demonstrate techniques. Any additional items or stats that you get, consistent with the recommendations earlier, will give you a much easier time completing the dungeon. Once inside the dungeon, run to the first large area. Cast Army of the Dead and run through as many monsters as you can. You only have a few seconds while the skill is active to kill enemies. Next, when Army of the Dead is expired and on cooldown, cast the Revive skill to get your 10 Revive minions up. And cast Bone Armor to activate its passive benefits. Once the cooldown on Army of the Dead has expired, then just repeat, running through as many enemies as possible. For the rest of the dungeon, when you are waiting on the cooldown for Army of the Dead to reset, you'll cast Bone Armor to keep its duration refreshed, you'll cast Decrepify on several enemies to benefit from the extra cooldown reduction, and you'll cast Revive on corpses you previously killed to make progress on the second dungeon objective. Once you've killed several enemies in this first area, head out to start segment number 2 of the dungeon map. You'll be back to finish clearing this initial area later on. If you have the Stewart's Greaves legendary power equipped, then get into the habit of casting Blood Rush just prior to casting Army of the Dead. You'll get a massive run speed increase and you'll be able to run through and kill many more enemies. You can also use Blood Rush if you get stuck in the middle of a pack of monsters and are taking too many hits. There, we already completed the first primary dungeon objective without any additional effort. We're just leveraging the set bonuses to kill enemies. Every time you cast Army of the Dead, barrel forward through enemies, then backtrack where you came from to cast Revive on the corpses left behind. If you have the Briggs Raft legendary power equipped, you'll be able to suck monsters in close together with your Decrepify Curse skill. You can make several clusters of enemies this way, and then you can run through them with Army of the Dead. This makes killing monsters very efficient. Note that the pull effect only works on a monster the first time you hit them with a curse. Here's the second large room. You'll want to make sure to clear this area pretty thoroughly. While waiting on the Army of the Dead cooldown, you can run forward to aggro monsters and start getting them to pursue you. This can help make larger groups for easier killing. Make sure you check and clear any of the outer offshoots as you're looping around the dungeon, so you won't have to come back to these spots later. This is the interconnection with the first large area of the dungeon. You'll loop back around to this spot, so you don't need to clear it completely now. Now we'll head to segment number 3 of the dungeon map. Just keep repeating the skill sequence. Make sure to keep casting the Revive skill to continue making progress on the second objective. Once you've completed it, then there's no need to continue casting Revive, and you can just focus on grouping up monsters. And there, we completed the second primary dungeon objective with plenty of time remaining. You can assign a follower for the dungeon, but they don't provide a huge benefit. Now we're back to the first large area. Just uncover the rest of the minimap and finish killing off the remaining enemies here. Just a few monsters left. And we're done. Good luck trying to finish this one. If you enjoyed the guide and would like to see more content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.